Hi, I'm Dan Kaufman. This is Grace Over Guilt. So, Monday, I told you about a story about saying no to the old house. Today, we're going to zoom out from that one decision and talk about the whole thing that's underneath it. Because saying no to the old house is only step one, right? So, if it's the easy step, it's not even that easy, then you're going to actually have to build a brand new one, right? So, and building one is completely different animal than actually deciding. Deciding is a moment. Building is 10,000 moments, and most of them are as dull as a dishwasher. And that's what's today's all about. So here we are. The old house has good bones, but a cracked foundation, and no amount of fresh paint fixes that foundation. You buy that. You decide, okay, I'm going to stop renovating the old one. I'm going to build something new from the ground up. That's great. But now what? Because nobody tells you what that actually feels like day to day. Everybody sells you the decision. Everybody sells you the transformation, the before and after picture. Nobody tells you or describes the Tuesday that happens in the middle. And so let me describe that Tuesday for you. It's unbelievably boring. It's invisible. It's one of those things that kind of comes out of, of like, what the hell am I doing? And it looks nothing like the movies. New construction's not a speech. It's not a highlight reel. It's a stack of unglamorous reps that nobody claps for. Block on top of block on top of block. Most of them laid in a room where there's no audience whatsoever. And I think we have to talk about that montage because the montage is the lie that ruins people. You know the montage. In the movie, the guy decides to change, and then there's 90 seconds of music, training, sweat, tears, calendar flipping, and he comes out the other side transformed. And we watched 1,000 of these growing up. And somewhere deep down, we come to believe that that's actually how it works. It's quick. It's set to music, visibly progressing every single day. But here's the deal. Real building has no montage. Real building is the same boring day repeated for way longer than it feels fair, with no music, no visible progress for a long, long, long time. And here's the single most important thing that I can tell you about the whole process. So if you only remember one thing from today, remember this. Boredom is where almost everybody quits. Not at the hard part, but at the boring part. Think about that. The hardest part at least feels like something. The hard part feels like drama. It has adrenaline. It has a story you can tell at dinner. But the boring part, it's just right? It just doesn't, it doesn't feel like anything. And nothing is a whole lot easier to walk away from than pain. People don't usually quit because it hurts too much. People quit because it stopped feeling like anything at all. And they mistake that flatness for failure. So today we're going to look at 3 pillars. And this is what the boring is actually made of. So pillar 1, it's all about maintenance versus load bearing. And this is the one that eats years of your life. There are 2 kinds of work, and here's the problem. From the inside, they feel almost identical. Maintenance keeps the old thing alive. Load-bearing work builds something that never existed before. And the truth is, they both make you tired, like unbelievably tired. They both fill up the calendar day in and day out. They both let you get to the end of the day and say, I worked really hard today, and mean it. You're not lying when you say it. You did work hard. You're just not sure why the hard work never seems to add up to a building, because you really don't see at the end of the day true like moving the path forward. Some people spend years, and I mean years upon years upon years, sometimes decades, confusing staying busy with building something. And they can't figure out why all that busy never turns into anything. It's because they were doing maintenance the whole time and calling it construction. Busy is not the same as building. Busy is often the most comfortable way to avoid building because busy lets you feel productive while you dodge the one scary thing that would actually move the fucking needle. So here's the tell. Write this one thing down if you're somewhere you can. If the work would have made sense for you, for the old you, the you from before any of this started, it's probably maintenance. If it only makes sense for the person you're becoming, it's probably load bearing. So that's the test. Run your to-do list through it. Half of what's on there, maybe more, is probably keeping the old thing alive just purely out of habit and you don't even realize it. Answering the same emails you've always answered, chasing the same kind of client you've always chased, doing the same thing over and over again, like the proverbial rat race, or living Groundhog Day. Remember the movie Groundhog Day, where he just lived it over and over and over again, or the proverbial hamster wheel. So reorganizing the thing you've already organized, patching the same leak you've patched 100 times, that keeps lights on, and the lights matter. Of course, not knocking that whatsoever, but it doesn't build anything new. Not one brick, not one. It doesn't move the needle forward. It doesn't do anything. It just keeps things basically running and humming along. And so let's make this concrete. And I've lived this, and unfortunately, it's really embarrassing to actually admit. For a good stretch, I kept the version of my old agency limping along on the side, and I told myself I was building. I truly believed it. Same emails, same kind of calls, same leaks I've been patching for years. And it felt like work because it was work. And it made me tired the way work does. But it was maintenance on the thing that I had already outgrown. Not 1 hour of it built the thing that I actually wanted and who I wanted to become. And I couldn't tell the difference from the inside, because from the inside, tired just feels like tired. Effort feels like effort. You can't feel the difference between the two kinds of work in your body. Your mind can't either. You can only tell by turning around and looking what you've got built, not only in the day, in the month, but in the last year. And when I finally turned around and actually looked at things honestly, there wasn't anything there. A year of exhaustion and nothing new standing. Basically maintenance mode. And here's the uncomfortable kicker on this one. The load bearing work, the stuff that actually builds the new thing, it's usually the stuff you're worst at, because you've never done it as this version of yourself. It's clumsy. You're going to fail. It's slow. You feel like a beginner, and you hate feeling like a beginner. You don't like that process of it feels like it's taking too long, which feels terrible and horrible. And so what do? We start to avoid it, and we run back to the maintenance work that we're actually good at, because being good at something feels productive, it feels safe, and it feels comfortable. But being good at it is the very often the sign that it belonged to the old you. The awkward, slow, I don't really know what I'm doing kind of work, that's the stuff that makes you feel like a fraud. That's usually the load bearing stuff. That's how you know it counts. If it's comfortable, be very, very suspicious of it. So that's pillar one. Pillar two, the transparency of trust. And this one fools everybody. I mean, everybody. I've fallen to it way too many times, because we've all been sold a lie about how it's supposed to feel. You think self-trust is going to arrive like a breakthrough, some big mornings where you wake up and you feel different. You look in the mirror and there's a new guy in there, a guy who's finally got it handled, who believes in himself, who walks different into the room. You're waiting for that morning. You look in the mirror every day and it's just not there. I waited for that morning for years. I kept thinking the confidence would just show up and then I'd act on it. But it doesn't work like that. It's actually backwards. Self-trust does not feel like a breakthrough, and it does not come first. It comes last. And it feels like an ordinary Tuesday where you just did the same thing that you said you'd do. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. The action comes first, and the belief comes way later, sometimes months, sometimes years, quietly after enough actions have stacked up against each other that you can't argue with them anymore. No applause, no moment, nobody's watching, just you, the rep, completed, and it's done in quiet. You said you'd write the thing, so you wrote the thing. You said you'd make the calls, so you'd make the calls, all of them, even though you're the one you were dreading. You said you'd get to bed at a decent hour, so tomorrow's version of you isn't underwater before it even starts, and you actually did it, even though nobody on this earth would have known if you had it. That's it. That's how you trust in yourself that stuff actually gets built. Not in the big dramatic decisions. It's those small baby steps and the boring ones that nobody sees, stacked on top of each other for the next day, until one day you look up and realize almost by accident that you actually believe in yourself again. And I think about what that does over time, and because it cuts both ways and it's ruthless about it. Every promise you keep to yourself is a tiny deposit into an account called I do what I say. And every promise you break to yourself quietly when nobody's looking is a withdrawal. And most people are quietly overdrawn. Not quietly, well, quietly because most people don't know it, but overdrawn in a sense that it's very, very significant and they just don't take the time to realize it. So they've broken so many small promises to themselves: the workout they skipped, the bedtime they blew past, I'm not going to have a drink tonight, the thing they'd swore they'd start Monday, that some part of them has stopped believing anything that they actually ever say. And then they wonder why they can't get themselves to move on to the big stuff. It's because they don't trust their own word anymore. Why would you jump when the guy telling you to jump is the same guy who's flaked on you 100 times? You wouldn't, right? And here's the mean little secret of it all. The thing that makes it so hard: it's completely transparent. It's invisible. The quiet reps compound, and the quiet skips compound too. Nobody claps when you do the rep. Nobody boos when you skip it either. So it's you. And our minds are very, very good at justifying all of that. So the entire thing runs on your word to yourself and absolutely nothing else. There's no external scoreboard. There's no crowd. There's no boss checking your work. That's why self-trust is the rarest thing there ever is. Not because it's hard to build. The reps aren't even that hard individually. Any one of them you could do right now, probably in a couple minutes, right? It's rare because it's built in the one place where you're the only witness. And most people can't keep that promise, not only to themselves, that they'll never show you that they broke it. That's the whole game right there. Can you keep the promise that nobody else is watching you? That nobody else is watching you keep? If you master that, and everything else in your life eventually bends towards you. Miss that, and no amount of motivation ever sticks. Now into pillar 3, and this is probably the hardest one. It's the identity of a builder. At some point, you've got to stop being the guy who survived the wreck and start being the guy who builds. And I need you to hear this clearly because it's subtle and brutal. They're not the same identity. You can't hold on to both at once. You have to put down one in order to pick the other one up. There's no version where you can actually carry both. The survive the wreck guy needs to know how hard needs people to know how hard it was. He leads with the story. He wants the wins. He wants the, wow, man, I can't believe you actually did that and made it through that. The wreck becomes his whole identity. Every conversation somehow circles back to that. And listen, I get it because I've been that guy for a very, very long time. And I'm still dealing with that. When you've been through something that's real, the through something becomes the most interesting thing about you, and you start to lean on it. You lead with that story. You tell that story. It becomes part of your identity. You start to introduce yourself with your scars. You lead with the wreckage because the wreckage is the thing you're sure is most impressive. But here's the thing. The builder doesn't do that. The builder just gets out of his own fucking way and just builds. He's not hauling the wreck into every room he walks into because he's too busy actually working and pouring that foundation. He's not uninterested in the past, and he's not in denial about it. He's just not living there anymore. He visited, he learned what he needed, and he moved out. He put it down and moved on. And this is where I'm going to give you the line I give you every single week because it's the whole hinge on this thing. And I'll keep saying it until it's in your bones. Guilt is doing something wrong and regretting it. Shame is feeling like a loser and wondering what I'm even doing here. I'll sit with that for a second because the survive the wreck guy, even when he looks humble, even when it looks like he's just being real and vulnerable and very often running on shame, he is running on shame. He needs the story because the story explains why he's allowed to be where he is. The story is his permission slip. And it's proof that he's learned the right to take up space. The builder doesn't need that permission slip anymore. The builder runs on something quieter and a lot steadier. So let me put it into a language we've been using all week, and because it lines up pretty darn well. Shame wants a quick renovation to hide the cracks. It wants the fast fix. It wants that proverbial easy button, the fresh paint, the thing that makes it look handled from the outside so nobody asks questions. Guilt is willing to do the slow, deep, unglamorous work of new construction. Shame needs a result to show people. Guilt just needs to fix the thing, whether or not anybody sees it. That's the difference between the two ways of moving through your life. And you're running one of them right now, today, whether you've named it or not. So how do you actually put the wreck down? Because it's easier for me to say stop leading with your scars and hard to do at 7 o'clock at the dinner table. Here's the practical version. You catch yourself reaching for the story, the hard time story, look what I've survived story, and you don't reach for it. You let the moment pass without cashing in your wreckage for sympathy or credit. It feels weirdly naked the first few times because you're so used to talking about it, to leaning in on it. But every time you don't reach for the story, you get a little bit more freedom back. You're teaching yourself that you're allowed to be here without the receipts. So here's the identity shift, and it's simpler than it sounds, even though it takes everything you've got to actually do it. You don't build the skyscraper so people finally understand how bad the old building was. That's the wreck guy, still performing the wreck, just with a bigger stage. You build the skyscraper because you're a builder now. Full stop. That's your identity. The building is not evidence in the case you're making about your past. The building is just what builders do. They build, they explain, or they don't explain, I'm sorry. They just freaking build. So now before I wrap this up, I've got something to say about time because it's the thing that everybody, takes everybody out, including me on my worst days. This is slow. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it's slow, but actually fast if you do it right. It's just freaking slow. New construction takes as long as it takes. And the timeline is almost never what anybody wanted, and especially you. So if you do the reps for weeks and see nothing, you'll do them for months and the building will barely be off the ground. And here's the trap in that. When you can't see progress, what does your brain do? Your brain starts to tell you, well, you're not doing it. There's no progress. What are you actually accomplishing? And it starts to play tricks on you because it wants the easy way out. And that's not the same thing. A foundation poured deep is the least impressive looking phase of the entire build. But if you notice, if you go to a construction site or drive by one every day, what takes the longest? It is that foundation. And once the foundation is poured, the rest of the stuff goes up relatively quickly because you can see the progress. So it's a hole in some concrete when you're looking at the foundation. From the street, it looks like nothing. But you can't put a single floor on a building that skipped it. The invisible phase is the load-bearing phase. The part where it looks like nothing is happening is usually the part everything else depends on. So you have to learn to trust the process on days the process shows you nothing. That's the skill, and that's the skill you need to work on. Anybody can keep going when they see the wins. That's the easy part. The whole game is whether you can keep laying blocks in the long, flat, boring middle when there's no evidence yet, running on nothing but your own word that this is actually working. So let's pull the three pillars together because they're really one thing looked at it from three different angles. New construction is maintenance you finally refuse to call building. It's trust you stacked quietly in a room when nobody else was watching. And it's an old identity you set down and a new one you picked up without announcing it to a single soul. Block by block, there's no view from the top without the reps at the bottom. And the reps at the bottom are boring. They're so boring. And that's not a flaw in the plan. That is the plan. The boring is the filter. Boring is the whole reason most people never get to that view. And because they can't stand doing something for long that it feels like nothing's happening and there's no progress. So if the work feels boring right now, if it feels like nothing is happening, if you're staring at your own effort wondering why there's no lightning and no soundtrack and no visible change, nobody's patting you on the back saying, hey, great job. I want you to sit with the possibility that boring is the sound of it working. The movies, the videos, they all lied to you. There's no montage coming. This is just a normal Tuesday in the rep and you doing what you said you do while nobody else watches. Do that enough times, more times than feels reasonable, more times than seems fair, way past the point you thought something should have happened by now. And one day you look up at something you built, something real, something that actually holds weight, something nobody saw you build, which is exactly why it's yours and nobody can take it. So here's your work before Friday. Of the three, maintenance versus load bearing, self trust, or identity, be honest with yourself about which one is most likely to be a shortcut right now for you. Not which one sounds nicest to work on. Which one are you personally dodging right now? For a lot of us, it's the boring reps and the quiet, the promises that the promises nobody's watching us keep. For some of us, it's the load bearing work we avoid by staying busy with maintenance that we're already good at. And for some of us, it's still needing everything to know how hard the wreck was. Find your one, be honest, and name it. So that's the lesson for today. So this is Grace Over Guilt. My name's Dan Kaufman. On Friday, I got a short one for you. The single moment from a holiday weekend that taught me something about how you actually build all of this for once all of this for once you've stopped trying to impress the crowd. Bring that word back with you, room. And we'll talk to you Friday. Thanks.